The dining room glowed with candlelight and gold napkins. I sat at the far end of the table, a bruise the color of eggplant under my left eye. Everyone could see it, though no one dared to ask. My daughter, Melissa, twirled wine in her glass and said lightly, "Mom had one of her episodes again." Drew had to calm her down. Her husband smiled like it was a joke. Laughter stumbled around the table, weak and nervous. My pulse hammered in my ears. I stared at the turkey I had roasted since sunrise, the mashed potatoes smoothed just right, and wondered how love had turned into this. The bruise throbbed each time I moved my jaw. Melissa's voice sounded like someone else's daughter, not mine. "Older folks get confused," she added. Drew grinned. "Yeah, but she's tough. She can take a knock." My stomach turned. I reached for my water glass, hand shaking so much it rattled. The guests pretended not to notice. "Let's say grace," I murmured, but no one joined in. While they talked, I slid a black envelope beside my plate. Its seal caught the candlelight. Melissa saw it, her smile faltered, and Drew's eyes narrowed. They didn't know I'd stopped being helpless. Not anymore. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and comment what time it is where you're watching from. The envelope lay there like quiet thunder waiting to break. Melissa kept talking, pretending nothing was wrong, but her gaze kept darting to the envelope. "Mom, you didn't need to overdo dinner," she said. "You should rest that eye." I forced a smile. "I'm fine." My voice shook. Drew reached for another slice of turkey. "Maybe you should tell everyone what really happened." His tone was syrup-sweet. She tripped. Melissa laughed too loud. I saw the lie glitter between them like broken glass. The neighbors, Carla and Ben, looked down at their plates. No one wanted to be part of whatever this was. My bruise pulsed with heat. I kept my fork steady. The black envelope sat just inside my reach. "Everything looks wonderful, Linda," Carla said quickly. "You always make Thanksgiving special." "Thank you," I whispered. Inside the envelope was truth. Hard truth. I'd waited weeks for this night, through the ache of bruises and silence. I'd cooked the whole meal as bait. Melissa thought she was clever, she thought I was weak. Drew's hand brushed hers under the table. "To new beginnings," he toasted. I raised my glass too, but not for that. My toast was silent, to endings that look like beginnings. The knife clinked against plates, the smell of gravy thick in the air. I could hardly breathe. Every move Melissa made was for show, the perfect daughter hosting her fragile mother. I remembered when she was little and used to braid my hair, giggling. That child was gone. This woman sitting across from me wore her pride like armor. Drew leaned back, smug. "Linda, maybe it's time to think about the future," he said. "Big houses are hard to manage alone." My jaw tightened. I managed just fine. "For now," he said. Melissa smiled thinly. "He's just worried about you, Mom." Worried. The word burned. I reached for my napkin, unfolding it slowly to hide my shaking hands. "I appreciate the concern," I said. "But I have plans of my own." "Plans?" Melissa's fork paused midair. "What kind of plans?" "You'll see soon." I touched the envelope, felt its weight like a heartbeat. Her face stiffened. She knew that envelope, she thought she'd buried it somewhere safe. The memory of her sneaking through my drawers flickered behind her eyes. "Mom, what is that?" she asked, voice too calm. "Something that belongs to me," I said. Drew chuckled. "Oh, now she's being mysterious." He didn't know how close his laughter was to ending. 2 days earlier I had been standing by the kitchen sink when Drew cornered me. He reeked of beer and cheap cologne. "Sign the deed," he said, waving papers. "You don't even use half this house." I backed away. "It's my home. I paid every mortgage payment. It stays mine." His face changed. "You ungrateful old bat." The shove came fast, so hard my hip hit the counter. My temple slammed the edge. Stars burst behind my eyes. I tasted blood. You're lucky I didn't make it worse, he said. I sank to the floor, dizzy, the world tilting. He left me there. Later, Melissa found me with a towel pressed to my head. She didn't help me up. She only sighed. Why do you make things difficult? She whispered. That night I sat in the dark, pain throbbing, shame heavier than the bruise forming under my eye. Then I remembered my nursing days, how I always told patients, control what you can. I looked at the papers he'd dropped, read every line, every trap. And I began to plan. By morning, I hid the bruise with layers of makeup. Melissa avoided my gaze, acting like nothing had happened. Drew whistled as he poured coffee, bold in his cruelty. Big day tomorrow, he said. Guests at 2. I'll handle it, I replied. He smirked. You always do. After they left, I stood in the kitchen and touched the bruise beneath the powder. The mirror didn't show all the damage. Inside, something had cracked open, not weakness, but resolve. I made a list on a notepad: bank, lawyer, documents, recorder. The list looked like survival. I slipped my late husband's wedding ring onto my finger. Help me, Tom, I whispered. The silence answered. Outside, wind rattled dry leaves against the porch. I thought about Thanksgiving, how Melissa loved attention, how Drew bragged when people listened. Maybe that's when truth should come out, in front of everyone. I picked up the black envelope I'd already prepared. Inside it waited everything they'd tried to steal. Thanksgiving morning came bright and sharp. I rose before dawn, bruised eye aching. The turkey roasted slowly, the smell filling the house. I set the good plates, folded the napkins the way Tom used to like. Doing it made me feel human again. Melissa breezed in wearing a gold dress. Smells nice, she said like a stranger. Drew followed with his grin. Let's keep today peaceful, huh? That depends on you, I said. He blinked, surprised at my tone. Don't start. I stirred the gravy, hiding my smirk. They thought the old Linda would tremble. Not today. Guests began arriving, laughter floating through rooms I had scrubbed spotless. I smiled and served and played my part. But every clink of glass brought us closer to the moment. The envelope waited inside the buffet drawer, black against the linen. The bruise under my makeup itched, a reminder. Sometimes pain can become purpose. Sometimes a table set for Thanksgiving is really set for judgment. When everyone had their plates, Melissa stood. Let's make a toast, she said, eyes sparkling. To family and new beginnings. She lifted her glass toward Drew. He smirked, satisfied. I lifted mine too, but my smile was calm, even gentle. To truth, I said quietly. No one noticed the difference. Drew carved the turkey with a flourish. Mom taught me everything I know, he joked. She's the reason I'm handy with knives. Laughter bubbled. I swallowed hard. You always did have a sharp hand, I murmured. He didn't catch the edge in my words. Melissa leaned close to her friend Carla, whispering something that made them giggle. I felt invisible again, until my hand brushed the envelope. I slid it beside my plate where the candlelight hit it. Carla noticed first. Pretty envelope, she said politely. Melissa's head snapped up. It's nothing, she said quickly. Mom likes to save bills. Not this one, I said. This one's for after dinner. Fork scraped against china. The sound made me flinch. Drew cleared his throat. So, Mom, have you thought about that deed yet? My pulse spiked. We'll talk later. No time like now, he pressed. Older folks forget things. Laughter again, uneasy this time. Melissa added, he's just trying to help, Mom. You can't take care of a big place forever. I met her eyes. I took care of you, didn't I? The room froze. Even the candles seemed to stop flickering. Melissa's smile cracked. We just want what's best. For you or for me? I asked. Drew's fork clattered onto his plate. You're being difficult again. Carla looked down. Ben coughed. "Excuse me," I said, pushing back my chair. "Before dessert, there's something you all should hear." My voice was steady now. The bruise throbbed under the powder. Maybe it's time this family learned what help really means. I reached for the black envelope. Everyone watched as I held the envelope. The room smelled of gravy and fear. My fingers trembled, but not from weakness. "First," I said, "to those who asked about my eye, I didn't fall. Someone helped me remember my place." Drew's jaw tightened. "Mom," Melissa warned, "don't embarrass yourself." "Embarrass myself?" I looked at her, really looked. "I think that job's taken." Gasps. I broke the seal. The paper crackled. Melissa's face drained of color. She recognized the logo on the letterhead before I spoke. "2 weeks ago, I went to the bank," I said. "Seems someone tried to add their name to my account without my consent." Drew's fork froze midair. "That's nonsense." "Funny," I said, "because the security camera caught you." A ripple of whispers swept the table. Melissa's hand gripped her wine glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. I laid the letter flat. "This envelope holds proof of everything you've done." I paused, letting their silence stretch until it hurt. "And we're just getting started." Drew stood halfway, face red. "You're lying." "Sit down," I said. My voice cut through the room like a knife. "Inside this envelope is a copy of the bank's report, recordings from our kitchen, and one more thing you'll find interesting." Melissa's breath hitched. "Mom, please." "No," I said. "Please is too late." I slid the second page out slowly. The paper gleamed white under the lights. "This," I said, "is my statement to the police and my lawyer." The guests murmured. Carla looked shocked. Drew's knuckles whitened around his fork. "You wouldn't." "I already did." I placed the pages neatly back into the envelope, sealed it again, and set it in front of Melissa. "You can open it after dessert." My heart pounded, but my fear was gone. The bruise under my eye no longer felt like shame. It felt like armor. "Now," I said softly, "who wants pie?" Inside the envelope was more than a banknote. I unfolded the paper and my hand stopped shaking. There was a bank report showing someone tried to add a name to my account. There was a copy of a notarized paper that looked like a deed transfer request. There was also a small printout from a dashboard camera I had hidden the week before. The print had a timestamp. It showed Drew in my kitchen on a late night, fumbling with papers and saying, "Once we get the deed, it's done." My breath left me slow and steady. Melissa's smile had faded into something raw. She stared at the print like it had burned her. "Where did you get that?" she asked in a voice so small it sounded like a child. I said, "From where I keep things safe." The room smelled of pie and gravy, but my mind felt like winter. Guests exchanged looks. Drew's face turned a hard color. He tried to grab the paper but his hand brushed the table only. I had thought about the moment 100 times, about how it would land when truth met their lies. The recorder had been a brittle bit of luck, an old voice device that I found in a drawer and thought to hide under the fruit bowl. When the tape played, Drew's voice saying, "She's one fall away," filled the room. The air went thin. Melissa's hand flew to her throat. My chest felt light, like a weight had lifted. This was not revenge for revenge's sake. It was the truth stepping into the light. I folded the papers back into the envelope with a careful hand and set it where everyone could see. The moment held. No one could look away. When the recorder played, people could not pretend anymore. Drew's smug laugh on the tape sounded cruel in the dining room. Guests leaned forward like they might catch the rest of the words. Carla put her napkin down slowly. Ben's fork clattered to his plate. Melissa's face was a portrait of surprise first, then fear. She had practiced the role of caring daughter for a long time. The role was flaking off. "This is a trick," Drew spat, but his voice trembled just enough to show it was not all confidence. I told the table how I had found the tape. I said I had suspected for weeks that mail was missing, that bills were being moved, that my pension papers were being tracked. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." I remembered the nights I spent awake, counting coins and reading bank statements by lamplight. I remembered how wasted I felt after the shove, the bruise, the shame. Now shame was a different shape. Now it was the word that belonged to them. I watched Melissa slide her fingers over the stem of her wine glass like it might hold her in place. "You shouldn't have done this in front of people," she whispered, but there was no force behind it. I had done it on purpose. I wanted witnesses, faces to remember the truth if anyone tried to rewrite it later. After the tape, Drew stood and accused me of lying. His voice rose and voices around the table darted between him and me. I felt calm in a way I hadn't in weeks. Calm felt like armor. I said, "I called the bank. They will show the attempt. I spoke with a lawyer. I filed a report." A low murmur spread. The room had split into two, those who saw the papers and those who wanted the old story to stick. The next sound was the one I had waited for, the one that would mark a change. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving I had seen Melissa at the mailbox. She was slipping letters into her sweater, my letters. I watched from the bay window while the sun cut thin lines on the porch. My first thought had been confusion. My second had been alarm. Later, in my kitchen, I found out I was right. Bank statements missing, an insurance form gone, a letter with a code for my pension account nowhere. I felt a hollow opening in my chest. I had raised Melissa with my hands and my heart. She used to be quick with a bandage and slow with a lie. The person at the mailbox had not been the child I knew. I had confronted her that night. She sighed and said, "It's for the bills." I asked which bills, and she gave a vague answer. I felt something change then. Trust had small cracks. Once you let a small crack spread, the whole thing can crumble. I thought of my late husband's toolbox and of the long nights at the hospital checking charts. There was a metal in me that did not go away just because my hair had silvered. I decided to do what nurses do, notice, record, act. I started taking photos of my mail before I opened it. I wrote down dates and amounts. I kept every paper. I made copies and tucked them into an old shoebox I had painted years ago. Each night I added a note. Missing letter, November 3rd, read one. Call bank, November 5th, read another. The shoebox looked ordinary, but it was a map. A map to the place where truth and right would meet. The bank visit was quiet and cold inside. I sat in the small chair across from a teller who smiled too quick and asked too few questions. I told her my name and gave my account number in a voice that didn't shake. She typed and clicked, and then lowered her glasses. "We have an internal note of an attempt to add a joint owner," she said. She pulled a report and showed me a signature that looked wrong, crooked lines, different pressure. "He came in twice," she said. "Said he had authorization." My hands felt thick as bread dough. "Did he leave a name?" I asked. She nodded at the paper. "Drew." I didn't remember his pleading face at the bank, the way he looked like a man who was owed something. I asked if the bank had filed anything. She hesitated, then said, "We filed an incident report. We'll hold any changes until you confirm in person." I felt a spark of relief that felt like warmth. I left the bank with a copy of their notes and a plan. I had proof now, official proof, and it was enough to move. Walking home, I thought of the meals I made, the floors I mopped, the life saved and given back by steady hands, and I understood that the bank's paper would be one more step in a set of steps I had finally decided to take. I had placed a small voice recorder in the kitchen without them knowing. It was old and cheap, but it worked. I'd taped it under the counter near the tea jar where nobody looked. The next day, Drew came in late and he talked on the phone, loud and careless. "We'll get the deed once she slips," he said. "Melissa can play the worried daughter and we'll sign the papers." He laughed like it was a game. I pressed the recorder button with fingers that did not shake. Later that night I listened to the voice, inch by inch. I felt the bile rise, a raw thing that wanted to claw out. Instead I wrote everything down. The tape had his voice, proof of intent. Intent matters in court and in people's hearts. I learned to be patient in those weeks. The recorder was one piece, the banknote another, the will revisions another. I spoke to Samuel Price, the retired lawyer who lived 3 streets away. He had been a stern man before he retired. He told me, "You have to be careful, Linda." He adjusted his glasses when he said it, like he had done many times in his old office. Evidence, signatures, bank reports. You did the right thing coming to me. He gave me a small card and said, "Don't talk to them about this. Let them think you are weak while we prepare." I held the recorder's file like a secret map to safety. An old nurse, a retired lawyer, and a few sheets of paper, this made a plan. Samuel's office smelled of lemon and old books. He asked me a long list of questions and wrote notes with a pencil that scratched like a small dry bird. "If they file for guardianship," he said, "we will be ready." His words tasted like silver. He showed me how a power of attorney could be used against someone, and how I would make one that would protect me, not give them keys. We drew up papers that named Samuel as an emergency coordinator only if 2 doctors agreed I could not make decisions. We left out any mention of Melissa or Drew. I signed a few documents, but Samuel said to wait on others. Timing matters in law as much as it does in kitchens. He told me something that felt like scripture: strike first on paper so they cannot say you were weak. That night I felt the house breathe differently. I had a plan that could stand like a small wall. I still cooked and smiled and pretended. They saw my smiles and called them weakness. They did not know how much like muscles my mind could be when it was trained. I slept with the voice recorder file safe in my little radio, the bank report in a drawer, and the idea of a will change burning slow and steady in my thoughts. After Samuel helped me decide on language, I began the slow work of building a legal shield. I contacted a notary, Janice Morales, a kind woman who knew how to make paper feel legal and final. I worked with Samuel to write a new will, to make sure a charity or a veterans fund would benefit the most, not those who had tried to take from me. Each draft felt like a stitch pulling a wound closed. I also made plans for a healthcare power of attorney naming Rosalind Turner, the owner of Morning Brew, the woman who understood old hurts because she had lived them. Rosalind had become my quiet friend. She listened and she did not judge. She helped by offering her time and her presence. I chose her because she had no money tied to my home and a long record of steady honesty. When we met in the coffee shop, I told her exactly what was happening. She put a hand on mine and said, "We will make it hard for them to steal from you." I felt a small fierce gratitude. It is strange how allies arrive in the shape of a cappuccino. With Samuel and Rosalind, I no longer felt like a woman waiting for the tide to wash her away. I felt like I had built a small dam. I had set Thanksgiving as my deadline for a reason. Melissa loved an audience. She wanted people to see her perform the good daughter role. I would give her the stage, then show the audience the script she had rehearsed. I invited neighbors and friends just as I always did. I invited the few people I trusted to bear witness if things got ugly. Rosalind was coming but would sit quietly and watch. Samuel would stay on call. The black envelope was not for show. It was a lever. I planned to pull it once I had their reactions recorded and witnessed. My heart beat faster the day of the dinner, but inside my chest I felt steady. I moved through the house and practiced loops, checking the recorder, the cameras, the hidden duct where I stashed more copies of my documents. I left a copy of the bank report in the envelope and a copy in my bag and in Samuel's office. The plan was simple: gather witnesses, reveal the truth, call the bank and the police if needed. I rehearsed the words I would say, but I also packed for how I would feel if Melissa screamed or if Drew denied everything. I set out the good plates and told myself that justice often needed good presentation. The same house that had once felt like a prison felt like a stage now. I walked through each room and whispered, "You will not have it." When the tape played at the table, I saw Drew's face go white like plaster. He stood abruptly, the chair screeching on the floor. "This is ridiculous," he barked. "Who put this here?" Melissa clutched at her napkin. I let the silence sit heavy and thick, like custard. Guests shifted uncomfortably. I watched them choose sides in their heads. Some looked at me with pity, others with doubt. I had chosen to show the tape because evidence has a way of changing even the warmest lies into cold truth. Drew flooded with anger, but the tape had his voice. He tried to reach across the table, but I slid the envelope closer to me like a shield. He accused me of being cruel in front of dinner guests. His mouth moved fast. "You have ruined our lives," he shouted. "You will pay for this." My stomach did a slow, tired flip. Samuel's words echoed in my head. Document everything. I had banknotes, recorded speech, witnesses at the ready. I wanted to tell the table all of it, how he shoved me 2 days earlier, how Melissa had swept letters away. But I held back, letting them see his scramble. You cannot make people believe 2 stories at once. Eventually, someone stood up and said, "Maybe we should step outside." Outside the house the air felt colder, and the night had the honest smell of wet leaves. The argument moved there like a small storm leaving the table behind. Inside, the envelope waited like a small quiet god. After the argument moved outside, I sat very still at the table. The taste of gravy and wine felt like memory. Guests whispered in corners. The recorder had done its work. Samuel called me from his car and said, "Don't let them touch the envelope." His voice was low and urgent. I folded the paper and kept it close to my chest. It felt like a talisman. When the police arrived, because whispers had reached someone's concern, the whole room held its breath. An officer came in and looked at my bruise and the paper on the table. I told him what had happened, calmly and clearly. I showed him the printout from the bank and the tape snippet on my phone. He took notes and asked questions. Drew's jaw clenched so hard I worried his teeth would break. Melissa pleaded, "You don't understand, it's complicated." The officer nodded slowly. Outside I heard Drew's raised voice, the kind that belonged to men who thought force would carry them through. Inside, I felt the trembling of a different kind, the shaking of the whole night shifting. The officer said he would take a report and speak to the bank. He was kind but firm. I watched Drew as the officer wrote, and I watched his face go from rage to something like fear. It was the fear of being seen. My heart felt heavy and strangely light at once. The envelope at my side had become a hinge. I pressed my hand over it and felt the night move. Drew lunged for the envelope once the officer left. His face was bright red, spit on his lip. "You think paper can save you?" he snarled. The table shook. "Sit down," I said, "steady now." "No," he slammed his fist so hard the silverware jumped. Guests backed toward the hallway. "You lied to everyone," he shouted. "You're crazy." Melissa's voice cracked. "Drew, stop." But he couldn't. I saw something wild behind his eyes. He swept his arm across the table, plates and glasses crashing. I didn't flinch. "You just proved my point," I said quietly. "They heard you. They saw you." My calm made him angrier. He came closer, his shadow cutting the candlelight in half. "You ruined us," he roared. "No," I said, "you did that yourself." I dialed 3 numbers, 911. The operator's voice was clear. "Emergency." "Yes," I said. "A violent man is destroying my house." Drew froze. Melissa gasped. The sound of police sirens would come soon. I could already feel it echoing in my bones. "You called the cops on your own family." Melissa whispered. "Family protects each other." "Exactly," I said. "That's why I'm protecting me." The sirens grew louder until red and blue lights blinked through the window. Neighbors peered out from porches. Drew tried to leave, but the officer from before stepped inside with another man. "Sir, step back," he ordered. Drew puffed his chest. "This is my house." "No," I said calmly. "It's mine. My name's on the deed." The officer's gaze moved from my bruise to Drew's clenched fists, then to the broken dishes. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" "Not tonight," I answered. But I was. He nodded once, then turned to Drew. You're under arrest for assault and destruction of property. The cuffs clicked. Melissa's face went pale. Please, she whispered, don't do this. Drew shouted something, but the door shut behind him. The noise faded with the car's engine. For the first time in months, the house was quiet. Only the tick of the wall clock filled the air. I sank into a chair, shaking all over. Melissa stood by the wall, arms around herself, eyes full of tears that didn't fall. You could have just talked to us, she said. I tried, I answered. But you never listened. The smell of burnt candles lingered while the truth finally stayed in the room with me. The officer came back later with paperwork. He'll spend the night in county lockup, he told me. We'll need your statement in the morning. I nodded. Thank you. When he left, I cleaned the broken glass alone. Each shard felt like a piece of the old life being swept away. Melissa hovered near the doorway. You didn't have to humiliate him. Humiliate? I turned toward her. He hit me, Melissa. He stole from me. He tried to take everything your father and I built. She wiped at her cheeks. He was stressed. The bills he made. I cut in. You chose to stand beside him. Her mouth trembled. I didn't know he'd hurt you. You watched him do it. My voice came low. You told people I tripped. She didn't answer. I carried the trash outside, the night cool and sharp. In the dark I whispered, no more lies. Inside, the Thanksgiving table sat half-cleared, candles melted to stubs. For years, that table had meant love and belonging. Now it looked like a battlefield after smoke cleared. I rinsed the last dish, turned off the light, and promised myself this would be the final night I ever trembled in my own home. Morning sunlight crawled across the floor when Melissa knocked on my bedroom door. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Mom, please, she said, he didn't mean it. I stayed seated on the edge of my bed. He always means it. She walked closer. If you drop the charges, we can fix this. No, I said. It's already broken. She knelt at my feet, clutching my hand. You don't understand. He'll lose his job, his license. He should have thought of that before raising his hand. My voice didn't shake. She looked up, face streaked with tears. So that's it. You're throwing away your family. Family doesn't throw punches or steal signatures. I stood and gently pulled my hand free. I'm keeping what's left of mine, myself. She backed away like the truth had pushed her. The house smelled of coffee and cold turkey. On the table, the black envelope still sat, edges bent. I touched it once, reminding myself that justice sometimes arrives wrapped in paper. Melissa whispered, You'll regret this. I answered, maybe. But regret is lighter than bruises. She left without another word. The sound of the door closing felt like the end of a chapter. Samuel arrived that afternoon with a stack of papers. We move now, he said. He handed me a clean envelope marked Last Will and Testament. She's still listed as beneficiary, he asked. I nodded. Then she still has motive. Change it. His tone was firm but kind. To whom? I asked. To whoever deserves it. I thought of my husband's old department and the firefighter charity he admired. To them, I said finally. Samuel wrote it down. Melissa gets $10, he added. Enough to make it legal but meaningless. The words tasted bitter, but I knew he was right. We signed at the notary's desk. The seal pressed down with a heavy click. It's done, Samuel said. I looked at the page that had once promised security to my daughter and now promised safety to me. She'll hate me for this, I whispered. Maybe, he said, but she already did. When he left, I placed the new will beside the recorder in my drawer. Outside, wind rattled the trees. It sounded like applause from ghosts. Tom, the life we built, all the times I had stayed silent. I whispered to them, never again. The days after Drew's arrest were strange. The house felt too big, too quiet. I moved through it like someone exploring old ruins. Boxes of my late husband's things lined the hall. I decided to sell some of them: rings, antique tools, jewelry, small pieces of memory that could turn into safety money. I met with a dealer downtown who paid in cash. The weight of the envelope in my purse made me feel stronger. I put most of it into a new savings account under a name Samuel helped me set up. They can't touch it, he promised. You've built your wall. When I came home, Melissa's car wasn't in the driveway. Relief mixed with sadness. She had gone to visit Drew, I guessed. I looked around the living room at the broken lamp, the dented table edge, the photos of happier days. I picked up one picture, Melissa at age 8, holding a pie, smiling with missing teeth. For a moment my chest hurt so much I could hardly breathe. I whispered, I loved you enough to fight back. Then I placed the photo in a drawer. Some memories need rest before they can heal. Samuel called me to his office. I filed restraining orders, he said. They can't come near you or your property. He slid papers across the desk. I also contacted Adult Protective Services. You'll need to give them your evidence. I nodded, feeling both strong and tired. They'll want photos, statements, recordings, he continued. Everything you showed me. I handed him a folder with copies. You did good work, he said. Most people freeze. You acted. I told him how hard it was to see Melissa cry and still stay firm. Guilt is a weapon, he said softly. She used it for years. He leaned back. From now on, speak to them only through me. I thanked him, my voice catching. Walking out into the afternoon sun, I felt the wind lift my hair. For months I had lived under the weight of their control. Now, each signed paper was like cutting a rope from my wrists. I stopped by Morning Brew on my way home. Rosalind poured coffee and asked, progress? Justice, I said. She smiled. That's a start. The investigator from Adult Protective Services came on a Tuesday. Her name was Dana. She wore sensible shoes and a serious face. She sat at my kitchen table with a small recorder. Tell me everything from the beginning, she said. I started with the shove, the bruise, the stolen mail, the forged signature. Her eyes never left mine. Do you have documentation? She asked. I slid the folder forward, bank reports, voice recordings, photographs, even screenshots of text messages. She nodded slowly. You've done most of my job already. Relief mixed with sadness. I was a nurse, I told her. I know what evidence means. She smiled gently. You'd be surprised how many people stay silent. We talked for an hour. When she stood, she said, we'll pursue charges for financial abuse and coercion. You did the right thing. After she left, I sat alone at the table where everything had started. Sunlight fell across the wood, turning it warm again. For the first time, I believed that peace might return. The bruise on my eye had faded to yellow, but the mark inside me had become something stronger, courage. A week later Melissa came back, pounding on my door. Her hair was messy, eyes red. You ruined everything, she screamed. They froze our accounts. Drew's lawyer says we're broke. I opened the door only enough to speak through it. Leave, Melissa. There's a restraining order. You called them, she yelled. You made them think I'm a monster. I showed them what was true. She slammed her hand against the frame. You'll die alone, she shouted. My porch camera blinked its small red light. It caught every word. Go home, I said softly. Find help. She cursed me again, then stormed down the steps. I waited until her car disappeared before I breathed out. Later I sent the footage to Samuel. He replied, good evidence. Shows ongoing harassment. I turned off my phone and sat in the quiet. Outside, the wind hummed through the trees like a hymn. I whispered to myself, she thinks this is revenge. It's protection. Then I locked the door and finally felt safe enough to sleep. Court came sooner than I expected. Drew pled guilty to assault. Melissa was listed as a co-conspirator for financial abuse. I sat behind Samuel at the hearing, my hands folded in my lap. Drew kept glancing at me, eyes full of hate. Melissa couldn't even look my way. The judge read the report, every ugly detail. When he said guilty, the sound felt like a bell closing a season. Drew was fined and sentenced to probation. Melissa faced mandatory counseling. Samuel whispered, "It's over." But I knew endings are never neat. Outside the courthouse, Melissa caught up to me. "You could have saved him," she said. "No," I answered, "I saved myself." She shook her head and walked away. Samuel laid a hand on my shoulder. "Go home, Linda. Rest." I drove back through streets lined with jacaranda trees in bloom. Purple petals drifted over my windshield like soft applause. When I stepped into my quiet house, I breathed in and whispered, "This time, the house belongs to peace." After the court, the house felt like a warm shell around me. I walked from room to room, fingers trailing across surfaces that had once been battlegrounds. The living room, which had been a mess of broken frames and angry hands, now held my chair where I liked to sit and read. Dust motes floated like tiny lanterns in the sunlight. I opened windows I had kept closed for months, letting air move through the rooms like a clean hand. The pictures on the mantel that had been kicked down were rehung, each nail placed with care. I made tea and sat at the kitchen table, the table I had once set for a meal that turned into shame. The quiet felt like a new friend. At night I slept without the prick of worry, the way a person sleeps after a long run and finally slows their breathing. I found little things that made me smile, a mug that Tom had painted with a crooked heart, a cookbook with notes in the margins. I spent afternoons walking the neighborhood, waving to Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Davis, who had watched everything and now watched me with softer eyes. Sometimes I caught myself looking at the empty chair where Melissa used to sit, and the longing still pricked. But I also felt a steady strength I hadn't known I still had. I had protected the last true thing I owned, my life. That knowledge settled into me and made me move differently, like a woman who had walked back across a bridge and found it still standing. A month later an envelope arrived with Melissa's handwriting. My hand trembled when I opened it, though the tremble was different now, less fear, more curiosity. Inside was a note that read, "I don't know why you hate me. I thought I was saving us." Her words were small and crooked like they had been written fast. I sat at the kitchen table and read it twice. There was no apology, no explanation beyond the raw line that sounded like a child asking for a reason it got punished. I folded the paper and placed it on the counter. I wanted to call her, to demand answers, to say everything I had felt in the months of broken nights. But I also felt how fragile the line between speaking and hurting could be. I had changed the will, I had called the bank, I had asked for protection. I could not undo what had given me safety. The note made me ache. I thought of Melissa as the child who once learned to tie shoelaces on my knee, the teenager who sneaked cinnamon rolls before dawn, the woman who had once comforted me after surgery. That woman seemed far away now. I put the note in a drawer with the other letters I had kept, not thrown away, not unread, but kept. Sometimes people write when they are scared, sometimes when they are trying to find where they went wrong. I left the drawer closed and made a cup of tea. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked and the day moved along as if nothing at all had happened. I sipped and let the silence be what it was, a place for small healing to grow. Spring planted itself slowly in the yard. I decided to do something small that felt like hope, dig a rose bed where the smashed coffee table used to lie. I bought young plants, soft green and folded like hands ready to hold blooms. Gardening was a slow work, the kind I liked. Kneeling in the dirt, my hands grew filthy and strong. I talked to the plants as if they were old friends. "Grow here," I said, patting the soil. The roses needed time and care. I mulched, watered, and pulled weeds, and after a few weeks pink buds winked awake. People walking by would slow and comment, Lovely roses. Each compliment filled me in a small way, like pennies dropped into a jar. In the evenings I sat on the porch and watched the sun set over my own roof. I felt proud in a quiet way. The house felt more mine with every pruning snip. I also started volunteering again at the clinic 1 day a week, shelving charts, helping nurses with small tasks. It felt good to move through halls where I had once been strong. My bruise had long faded, but the memory of it still made me careful. I found you could grow a life again, small bit by small bit. And every time a rose opened its petals, I thought of the love that'll need time to return, and the love you replace when you cannot go back. Samuel stopped by one quiet afternoon with papers I had expected. He handed over official documents that confirmed the will change, the frozen accounts, and the final court order preventing Melissa and Drew from contacting me. "It's official," he said, closing the folder. "You are protected." The words settled into my chest like warm bread. I felt relief, but also a strange loss. When you close doors for safety, sometimes rooms become empty. He stayed for tea and we spoke about small things, his granddaughter's piano lessons, a book he had loved. Legal work can feel cold, but Samuel's voice always warmed it into something human. Before he left, he said, "You did what you had to do." I nodded. "I wish it didn't cost so much," I said. He tapped the papers. "It cost nothing compared to your life." After he left, I walked through the house and opened the windows to let in a clean, sharp wind. The mail came and went without theft or trickery. I found myself humming in the kitchen. Life, even after a storm, has a way of asking you to lean forward. The house was mine again, not because of a deed or a will only, but because I had made it a place that would not tolerate fear. That Thanksgiving arrived with a cool, soft sky. I set the table like I always did, good plates, folded napkins, the silver that Tom had polished for years. I invited people who were real parts of my life now: Samuel, Rosalind, Frank the retired fire captain and his wife, Janice the notary, and 2 neighbors who had become friends. I left one place at the table open. It felt like a mark of courage more than kindness. The day moved slow and warm, and I cooked recipes that made my kitchen smell like home. When the guests arrived, they carried casseroles and laughter. The room filled with stories of small kindnesses: the time Frank rescued a cat from a tree, the way Janice made a bad joke and then laughed so hard she cried. We shared memories of Tom, of the good days. I realized then that the company I had chosen were people who would stand up in court and on porches. They were witnesses to my life, yes, but also friends who made the house feel safe. No one asked about the past unless I brought it up. The conversation moved like birds across a field, light and free. For the first time since the bruised Thanksgiving, I felt the table belonged to love again. I looked at the empty chair and did not feel the sharp pull of loss so much as a gentle note, an invitation, maybe, for the future. When the plates were cleared, I rose and spoke quietly. "One chair," I said, "remains open." They looked at me with kind eyes. "Maybe one day she'll come back," I added. The words were not a plea but a possibility left in the world. The empty seat felt like a sentence unfinished. I had no idea if Melissa would ever walk back through my door asking for forgiveness, or whether she would send another note with a different shape of truth. For now, I chose to leave a place for what might be possible, but I would not hinge my heart on it. After dinner, Rosalind helped me wash dishes and we talked about small plans, a spring trip up the coast, places with wind and gulls. Her hand brushed mine when we passed a glass, an innocent, kind thing that made my heart tilt. I felt less like a woman hiding and more like one who was learning how to live in the light. The empty chair did not make my joy less, it made my choices clearer. If Melissa returned, there would be questions. If she did not, there would be new days. I had set the table for truth and for kindness both. Months passed and the world slowly rearranged. Word came through a brief phone call that Melissa and Drew had separated. Drew's gambling and debts had eaten at the edges of their marriage until it crumbled. Melissa called me one late afternoon from a shelter number. Her voice was small but real. "I left him," she said. "I'm getting help." I listened, not hopeful but steady. "I'm glad you're safe," I answered. She asked a question that made my chest ache with old love. Can we meet? I paused. The months had taught me caution. I asked for time, and she agreed. In the days that followed, I thought a lot about what forgiveness might mean. I had learned that forgiveness does not erase what happened. It is not a wiping of pages. It is the slow work of deciding not to carry weapons made of the past. I signed up for another clinic shift and planted more roses. Life felt fuller in small ways. When she finally knocked on my door months later, I opened it and let her in. She smelled like rain and fear. We sat at the kitchen table, and she cried, "I lost everything." I wrapped my hands around hers. The years we had shared did not vanish, nor did the hurt. But we began to talk in new ways. She told the truth and I listened. It was the start of something hard and honest. We met at a small cafe and then again at my house. The conversations were hard and full of small steps, questions, apologies, explanations without excuses. Melissa said she had been scared and angry and that Drew had been a force that moved her like a tide. I asked blunt things about the money, the bank, the forged signature. She answered with a messy honesty that hurt and helped. I was selfish, she said. I wanted what I thought would make us safe. That kind of confession does not fix everything, but it is a door. I told her the truth about what had been taken from me, my privacy, my trust, the nights of fear. Sometimes our words clashed, sometimes they fit like pieces. One afternoon we walked in the park and did not speak much. The quiet was a new kind of company. I worried less about giving permission for her to come back and thought more about whether I could build boundaries that kept us both safe. Our meetings did not make us mother and daughter like before, they made us two adults who were learning new ways to live with old hurts. That, I realized, might be enough. Forgiveness came slowly, like dawn, not sudden and not complete. One day, while we sat with tea, I looked at her and said, "I forgive you." Her face changed like sunlight finding a window. But I also said, "I won't forget." She nodded, small and true. The words did not mean everything was the same. They meant I would not carry her actions as a stone around my neck. We agreed on small things, payment plan details she would honor, visits limited to safer spaces, counseling together if it felt right. The hardest part was deciding whether to let her back into the house. For now, I kept the empty chair, but I also kept the locks and the papers that had saved me. Forgiveness was not an eraser, it was a map that might let us walk again with careful feet. That night I sat on the porch and watched the roses bloom under the moon. I felt a quiet pride that I had chosen a life of truth over fear. The cost had been steep, but the result was a life that belonged to me. A year after the bruise, friends gathered for Thanksgiving. The house was warm with laughter and honest company. I stood and raised my glass. "To new beginnings," I said, and the room echoed it back. People cheered, and I felt a simple joy that was not loud but steady. Melissa was not at the table. She had her own path to walk. I had friends who had stood by me, a lawyer who protected me, and a woman who sat beside me now, holding my hand in a way that felt like a partner. I looked at the empty chair and thought of the person I had been and the woman I had become. The house belonged to truth now, and to safety. I had learned something that Thanksgiving, justice is not about revenge, it is about refusing to be small so others can be safe. I raised my glass again and spoke softly, to caring for yourself first, and for those who truly deserve a place at your table. If you liked this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what you felt when the envelope opened. Thank you for watching, please like and subscribe to this channel. Let me know where you are watching from and leave your thoughts in the comments.